What's up,
Welcome
everybody?
into the blogger. I forgot if I would do the welcome in or Dan does the welcome
didn't know.
in because we haven't been here in a while. I'll
Well,
just do it. Phil, you don't do it. You've never
No,
done the
that's-
welcome.
that's fair.
When have you ever done the welcome in
Never.
the blogger?
I don't know. It's 2023.
Florida Phil is here. Dan Weiner is back. Matt, I don't have a nickname yet. I'll get one. We're back. First episode of the Blogger Bowl this year. We have a nice new look thanks to Dan. It looks fantastic. Boys, we get to talk college football today. We're talking college football. Dan's got a Tulane shirt. I got my Washington shirt. I don't know if Phil's wearing home field apparel, but that's okay. It's green. We're Notre Dame. I wanted to get my Notre Dame shirt, but it's in the wash, so I had to settle for the Washington one. Guys, I think I know the answer, but how are we doing? We're less than 3 weeks away.
That's all that matters.
It's crazy, dude. It's like you wait so long and then suddenly it just barrels towards you, and it's like week 0. And I sent it to you guys in the chat. Week 0 feels like the beer goggles of college football because I'm staring at the schedule and I'm like, oh, UMass in New Mexico State. That's a game that I want to watch. And I've already preemptively told my wife, like, these are going to be some terrible games that week, but if we're not doing anything that night, I'm going to watch some really, really bad college football games. And I don't care because I'm very excited that college football is almost around the corner, despite everything going on in the sport of college football, which we're not really going to address today. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but in a different context a little later. But like, we're not going to talk about all the realignment, whatever. We want to talk about the stuff that we do enjoy about the sport, and we will do that through the prism of superlatives. I pitched the idea to the guys. What if we kind of do this sort of like NBA awards instead of college football awards, best receiver, best law, like that kind of thing. So we're gonna have a list of categories for you. We're gonna do the portal god of the year, the most improved player, the rookie of the year, true freshman only. Don't bring any of these redshirt freshmen in this competition.
Those don't count.
Coach of the year, defensive player of the year, MVP, and Heisman Trophy winner, because I think MVP and Heisman Trophy winner could be different guys. At least in my mind it is. So we will start. I figured there's only one place that we could start with 2 Notre Dame guys on the show. We're going to start with the portal god of the year, or the guy who transferred that you think is going to make the biggest impact for his new team. Do you two want to just fight to the death over who's taking Hartman or what?
On three.
Matt, you can take it. You can take it.
Okay. Well, I mean, it is for me. It is Sam Hartman. I had a second one just in case, but it's very big of Phil to give it to me. Sam Hartman is the best quarterback Notre Dame has had in, I don't know, since Jimmy Clausen, probably. I mean, Deshaun Kaiser had his moments of being really good. Ian Book obviously is going down in Notre Dame record books with the most wins and all that, but he was, an above average quarterback. Sam Hartman gives a very talented roster, a really good defense coming back, and a surprisingly talented young group of wide receivers, that elite-ish quarterback that they really haven't had in South Bend in a long time. And if you're going to beat the teams like Ohio State, like USC, like Clemson, all of which are on their schedule this year, you need more consistency out of the quarterback play. Notre Dame was able to beat one of those teams last year with Drew Pine as their quarterback. They hung around with Ohio State with Tyler Buckner. They hung around with USC for a little bit. That game wasn't all that close, but again, they were there if it wasn't for a bad turnover with Drew Pine as their quarterback. Now they have a very similarly talented team coming back. They have 2 probably first-round draft picks starting at their tackles, and they hopefully have a quarterback that is the one thing that program has been really lacking to get themselves over the edge. I'm not going to say it does that this year because there still are some question marks, but in terms of an elite program getting the one position, the most important position in sports that they need, they certainly got that guy. And Phil and I remember joking towards the end of last year and the beginning of the offseason, how cool would it be if Sam Hartman hit the transfer portal and went to Notre Dame? None of us thought it was even a possibility. And then lo and behold, it happened. So it's a homer pick, but I also think it's a very valid pick.
Yeah, and I'll get into Sam Hartman a little bit later, but you didn't mention how handsome he is.
I was going to leave that part to you. Okay, I knew you wanted to touch on that one.
That's my initial contribution because it looks like Drew Pine hit puberty, which is great. And so I'm glad that Notre Dame's going to have a grown-up at quarterback this year. I'll get to Sam Hartman a little bit later, but I actually want to go in a little bit different direction in terms of where I think just perfect fit for a quarterback. And this could be, I was debating whether this doing most improved as well, but I weirdly think a great fit from a transfer portal perspective is Robert Anae and Brennan Armstrong linking back up at NC State. So if you look at Armstrong's, 2021, he was one of the top statistical quarterbacks, and honestly was so much fun to watch, was just pretty electric throughout all the games. And then he suffered some injuries towards the end of the year. Robert Anae took off, and then following that, Brennan Armstrong had an just a god-awful year, which I think is a combination of injuries, offensive fit, scheme, etc. And so now he's going back into a place of comfort. So I'm really interested to see, obviously NC State lost Devin Leary, but they gained Brennan Armstrong and his offensive coordinator, which it's kind of like getting the band back together type of feeling. So I'm really interested to see kind of how NC State looks this year with Brennan Armstrong at the helm, especially given that it's a completely familiar system that he's coming in and owning and operating.
So I wanted to try to stay away from a quarterback because obviously a quarterback is a very easy answer and there's a lot of good choices out there. But I went to the wide receiver position for my portal god of the year. And well, basically Caleb Williams won a Heisman Trophy last year. Jordan Addison was the Biletnikoff winner 2 years ago, came to USC. He is now in the NFL. So there's a hole at wide receiver number 1 for the USC Trojans. So Dorian Singer, who transferred to USC from Arizona, is a guy who has a chance to be a big-time player for that team. Last year at Arizona, he had 98 targets, 66 catches, and 1,100 yards. Taj Washington and Mario Williams are solid receivers for USC. You could make the argument that Zach Branch, who is the number 7 recruit in the country, could be the Rookie of the Year candidate that we'll talk about later on in the show. But someone has to replace Addison. And as much as I like Jaden DeLora, who's one of my favorite college football players to watch, Singer could see an uptick in production with a much more efficient, much better quarterback in Caleb Williams. And if they find that wide receiver 1, that's just kind of one of the only real question that you really have to worry about on offense for USC. I almost said Oklahoma because of where he used to play. For USC, we know the defense is still going to be an issue, but hey, I mean, if the defense still sucks, they're going to be able to need to throw the ball. So Dorian Singer, a guy who had a really, really good year at Arizona last year, moving to play for a better coach and a better quarterback, is my choice there. So for most improved player, Matt, why don't you start us off?
I got to pull this one up again because I forgot who I went with here. Most improved player. This one's going to sound a little bit weird because, like, I don't think he's still very talented. He just had a little bit of a down year last year, and I think started to get a little bit disrespected because of his health issues. Travion Henderson. I'm expecting him to come. Numbers were down last year because he was off the field a little bit more. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka had awesome years. C.J. Stroud was the focal point of that offense because he was so good. Travion Henderson started to get a little bit of flack for not playing as much, not being as productive. The offensive line obviously wasn't run blocking as well either. I think he's in line for a huge bounce back year this year. Anything anybody wants to talk about is Marvin Harrison Jr., and rightfully so. He might be the best player in college football or one of the top 5, whatever. We'll get to that. But Travion Henderson has made that team go as a freshman. I think he's the guy that is going to want to have a big year this year and probably get himself into the NFL as soon as possible. I think this is a huge year for him because Ohio State's going to have to get that running game going out of the gates because obviously they're breaking a new quarterback. It's probably going to be Kyle McCord, but I'm looking for him. If he's healthy, I think he's got a chance to have a huge breakout year this year because he's going to be getting none of the attention despite being as talented as anybody on that roster, not named Marvin Harrison Jr. And quite honestly, he's at his best up on that level of Marvin Harrison Jr. He's been that good at times.
Yeah, he's an absolute moose to bring down.
Yeah.
Phil, what do you got?
So I'm pulling actually one, Dan, out of your backyard, and I'm going with Quinn Ewers. So I
cut his hair.
That's the thing. It's his big vibe change in terms of it. It clearly seems like, and this is all just speculation, but he was just running purely off of like Busch Light and God-given talent. And so he's obviously taken a bit of an attitude change of I'm going to be this kind of like figure with the mullet, with the NIL to, all right, I'm going to focus, put in the work. And from all accounts in the off seasons, that has been taking place. I think part of that probably has to do with Arch Manning coming to Texas, right? You take the number 1 quarterback in the class behind him, pump him behind you, puts a little bit of the pressure on. But I mean, the natural talent is obviously there. I think we saw it versus Alabama before he got hurt. And for me, that was just like gunslinger in its finest form. And so I think putting some guardrails around him, getting another year in the Texas system, taking things a little more seriously, I think as he looks at, hey, if I could squander my NFL potential and future earnings if I don't really take this seriously. So I really think he does bounce back. Could be a huge win for Texas to have an elite quarterback. So I'm excited to watch him this year, knowing that he's less of a wild card and I think a little bit going to be more consistent and less all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll save my thoughts on the entire Texas quarterback thing for when we do our Big 12 preview in a couple of weeks when I get back from my trip. But there's certainly a case to be made that it's true. Like, he should take a step forward this year. There's a lot of reasons why he potentially struggled when he came back from the injury after that Oklahoma game. So, it's going to be fascinating to see. And that Texas team is loaded in a lot of spots.
Yep.
So really, Quinn Ewers is the reason they're going to be successful or not. And it'll be interesting to see. For me, my most improved player, I'm going with Nicholas Singleton, the running back from Penn State. And I know that you might be asking, how much room does a guy who ran for 1,000 yards as a freshman have for improvement? And my thing is, like, a lot of it is actually going to depend on his offensive line. Penn State was wildly inefficient running the ball last year. They were 94th in the country in rushing success rate, 106th in the country in opportunity rate, which is the percentage of rushes that go for at least 4 yards. But they were 5th in the country in rushing explosiveness. So if the offensive line could open up a hole for him, he would bust through it and get big gains. The offensive line should be better. Olu Fashanu is a projected top 5 pick next year. And you look at the history of running backs at Penn State, Larry Johnson, Kajana Carter, Saquon Barkley. This guy is the next one. Like, 19th ranked recruit in the country as coming into college. He is an immensely talented kid. I know you guys did not like Sean Clifford. He was
he's got a quarterback now with defense is probably gonna have to respect.
Sean Clifford was decently efficient as a quarterback, but Drew Allar's ceiling a lot higher. But Drew Allar is a bit of an unknown at this point. And how do you help a quarterback who's trying to find his footing now as a new starter? You give the ball to your bell cow guy. I know Kaytron Allen had actually more carries last year. I don't think you're going to see the same split. It's clear that Nick Singleton is their guy, and I just look forward to seeing that guy become one of the star players in college football. The Allar thing is interesting, and he was a guy I kind of thought about. I'm trying to stay away from quarterbacks as much as I can because all anyone ever does is talk about quarterbacks. However, for the rookie of the year, I don't know. Phil, who's your rookie of the year?
So I actually not going quarterback route. So
I hope we didn't pick the same one.
Caleb Downs?
No, okay, thankfully.
Yeah. So I'm going Caleb Downs from Alabama, who's projected as their starting safety. And so for me, Nick Saban has said like kind things about him, which for me, that's any indication. Like, Nick Saban is such a reserved guy. And so I think Nick Saban said like he does everything at a high level and is conscientious and is such a smart player. And I feel like that's pretty high praise coming from Nick Saban, from a guy who doesn't really dish out that type of praise. And also to step into a starting safety job and to grab the starting safety job in the spring as a true freshman and be the de facto starting safety heading into fall camp as a true freshman, I think is just wildly impressive. And he was a guy who I was just extremely high over. I mean, athletic genes are just flowing through his family. It's already second time bringing up Josh Downs on this podcast, but brother of Josh Downs. And so I'm extremely high on him. I think he's going to fall into the next line of great Alabama safeties. People have been comparing his like body of work and mentality and approach to the game to Minkah Fitzpatrick when he showed up to Alabama. So
it's high praise.
It's of anyone to go in and have, a defensive minded, DB minded coach like Saban present that much praise. It's really, really high on Downs going into this year.
Matt?
Yeah, if Nick Saban's given somebody that much praise early, that's probably a pretty good thing, good indicator. I'm going to little bit of a homer pick for me here as well, but I'm going to go with Jeremiah Love out of Notre Dame. I think he's top 96 overall recruit, 4-star recruit. One of a trio, I think, of running backs Notre Dame originally had in this recruiting class, and then a bunch of them ended up moving out, and they were able to hang on to him. But that running back room, for as good as it was last year, did lose some pieces. Audric Estime is back, with Logan Diggs transferred to LSU. Chris Tyree is now a slot receiver. And what Jeremiah Love has the potential to give them is the lightning to Audric Estime's thunder. And we know Notre Dame's going to want to run the football, despite now having a new shiny toy and Sam Hartman at quarterback. They like running the football. That's their identity. That's always been their identity as a team. And I think a smaller, faster, explosive back that they haven't really had in a while is going to give him a chance to get a lot of opportunities out of the backfield, a lot of touches, and just be put in a lot of creative, different situations that Audric Estime is not really built for. As good as he is running the ball in between the tackles, he's not a guy that's getting involved in the pass game as much. I know Love started camp, I think 4th or 5th on the depth chart, but that's because he's a true freshman. He's got 3 redshirt freshmen ahead of him. I really think he's got a chance to break out in this offense this year as more of the speed back to Audric Estime's, thunder.
Yeah, he's 200 pounds and runs a sub 10 500. So that's
it's pretty fast.
It's alien-like. for my rookie of the year, guys, I had to do it. I have to go to the alma mater. I have to go to the University of Texas for my freshman of the year. And I'm taking someone who was the #1 player at his position this past year. I'm, of course, talking about Anthony Hill, linebacker for the University of Texas. He was the number 17 player in the 2023 recruiting class, the #1 linebacker. Texas has Jalen Ford, who was the preseason Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, but they don't have any other proven depth at linebacker. It is a spot that is up for grabs. Physically, he's about the same profile as Harold Perkins from LSU, tall, rangy, fast, athletic. They might just unleash him and let him wreak havoc the way Perkins did last year. Texas has some good pass rush options, but they don't really have a guy who you're going to expect to contend for like double-digit sacks unless Barron Sorrell takes the next step. So they might just unleash him, let him go do his thing. So it could be Anthony Hill. And he's probably not going to play that much. I just had to commit to the bit here. And for the record, for anyone who is watching this, if you're expecting to see Arch Manning play this year, if Arch Manning plays significant snaps for Texas in 2023, something has gone very, very wrong. Arch Manning is #3 on the depth chart right now. It has nothing to do with his performance in the spring game or anything like that. Arch Manning played Catholic school football in Louisiana. Like, we're not talking about playing. Look, you guys know, like, you're not playing the big 2,000 student public schools in a big state like Texas or California. Louisiana produces a ton of great players. We know that, but it's not one of like the bigger states. He was playing against bad competition in high school. He's got to make a transition. And honestly, if Arch Manning and if Cooper Manning really wanted him to start this year, he wouldn't have gone to Texas. No. Like, this has been part of the plan, was for him to redshirt. Texas is very high on Malik Murphy, their backup quarterback, big kid, big arm. So if Ewers doesn't work or if Ewers gets hurt, you're going to see Malik Murphy long before you see Arch Manning, and then we can worry about all of that next year. For Coach of the Year, I want to start because we didn't discuss if we were all going to overlap on this one, and I want to get mine out there.
Sure.
Guys, I'm buying the Wisconsin Badger hype in 2023. Mine. Yeah, I knew someone else
that was my ultimate. So not #1, but it was my
all right, well, then maybe we'll have to go to Phil and send me because I need to find a new one.
See if Matt can. I didn't even.
It's a good one. It's a good one. It's a really good one.
I did have a backup plan, but I didn't want to commit to it. Look, he's a great coach. We know that. You look at what he did at Cincinnati. They not only develop players, like they developed players into NFL's talent. Like they put a bunch of guys in the NFL from Cincinnati. He's a tough, defensive-minded coach. We know what he can do with the defense. And then the best hire that he made was he brought Phil Longo with him to Wisconsin. Phil Longo was at North Carolina, and Phil Longo's an air raid disciple. But and people are like, ooh, is Wisconsin going to start throwing the ball like they're Texas Tech under Mike Leach? No. Phil Longo is just the epitome of a coach who tailors his offense to what his offense does well. In 2020 at North Carolina, Javonte Williams, Michael Carter both ran for 1,000 yards. And then this year they didn't have a lot, or this past year they didn't have a lot of talented running backs. So they went to the air more, and Drake Bay became a Heisman candidate, potential like top 2 or 3 pick in the draft. Last year was his 4th year at UNC, was the first year they threw the ball more than they ran the ball. So he's not going to come in, and even though they have Tanner Mordecai and all that, they're not going to come and throw the ball around. We know Wisconsin is beef. They're going to run the ball. They're going to play good defense, because even though you don't have Jim Leonard anymore, you know that their defense is still going to be very good under Fickell. And if the offense can just have a functional forward passing game, it's just going to make Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi even better. Buy all the stock you can in those guys, because they're going to have big years. And I'm going to put it out there now as a spoiler for our Big Ten preview show. My preseason bet for our Big Ten show is Wisconsin plus 125 to win the West. Iowa refuses to try to play offense. Minnesota's a little bit rebuilding on offense. Purdue's in a new situation. Illinois, I just don't think they've got the horses. I'm way on board with the Luke Fickell train, and I know I was trying to filibuster there a little bit to give Matt some time. So Phil, let's give him a little bit more time. Phil,
I got a couple options, but I'll let Phil go first.
So I'm gonna keep Florida Phil in check here. I'm gonna go with Mike Norvell. All right, I have been a fan of his since he showed up to Florida State, and I appreciated that he took his lumps early. And if you look at things from a recruiting standpoint, from projections of this year, they're a fun team to watch. But I think I'm taking kind of like a multi-year approach here, where he's taken one of the most storied programs who is very, very in a very bad place. And it was almost like a laughing stock of the ACC, which is just crazy to think about. That was Florida State like 3 years ago, and really turned them around. Completely gutted things from a culture standpoint. And I think this is a year where they have big time talent at quarterback, big time talent at wide receiver, brought in some good transfers, have some high level defensive talent. And I think it's all thanks to Norvell. So I'm buying the hype in him. And I think for him, I feel like he probably feels this is their window for a year to make a run, because you're going to be losing some of that top tier talent. And then there'll be a little bit of reloading, which they're doing a great job on the recruiting front. But I think he's going to see this as a bit of a make or break year. And I think anything under 10 wins is going to be definitely a disappointment. And so I'm excited to see, especially them starting off the year at LSU or versus LSU. I think it's at LSU, right?
That's a neutral.
No, it's in Orlando. It's a neutral site in Orlando.
Okay. So that's going to be one of the, I'm so excited that that's a week 1 game. I'll just say that. And we'll get to that way down the road, but it's just great opening game.
So I'm not as high on Florida State as everyone else is. I think they're going to be very good this year. I'm actually buying the Clemson hype. My backup choice for coach of the year was I can't remember. I'm blanking on his first name now. Riley's younger brother, Garrett Riley.
I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say.
Well, I was going to joke to say that it was going to be Dabo just to mess with you guys, but the Garrett Riley hire, and when we talk the ACC, we'll go more into it. One of the best hires in college football this year, I think, at any position is going to be great. But nevertheless, all right, Matt, let's filibuster enough.
No, it's good. I had a couple options. Part of me wanted to go with Brett Bielema because I love what he's doing at Illinois, but you know what? I'm not going to make it Brett Bielema. I'm impressed with what he's doing at Illinois, but that's going to be a really tough project this year. Losing Chase Young, losing so much talent from that defense. I still think he'll be good, but I'm not sure they're getting back to 8-5 like they were last year because the schedule's not terribly easy. I'm gonna go with Josh Heupel. What he did at Tennessee last year, I thought was obviously fantastic. He's getting that program closer and closer to being back. And I mean, Hendon Hooker looked great last year, but before Josh Heupel, Hendon Hooker really wasn't all that much. Obviously, he was at Virginia Tech, struggled, transferred into Tennessee. And in that offense, he was able to absolutely just turn his football career around, got himself drafted. And then we saw it, I know in a small sample size, but in that Orange Bowl, Joe Milton looked really, really good in that offense against the Clemson team that obviously was a little bit down last year, but still very talented. Prior to Tennessee, obviously Joe Milton struggled a bunch at Michigan, struggled before Josh Heupel got there at Tennessee. I think if we see him do that again with Joe Milton, obviously everybody wants to say how talented Joe Milton is. Clearly he has a lot of tools. After what Heupel did at Tennessee last year with Hendon Hooker, I think if he could do something again similar with Joe Milton, we're talking about one of the best quarterback developers, offensive coaches in college football. So I love what he did at Tennessee, obviously last year. Our Vols, Phil. I'm looking forward to see what he can do this year again.
Yeah, I think the thing with Joe Milton is the arm has been legendary since he was in high school. Everyone knew about it. But at least when he was playing at Michigan, when he actually got legitimate playing time, you just never knew where the ball was going to go on any throw. It's sometimes he'd throw it to a teammate. Sometimes he'd throw it to someone on the other team. Sometimes he'd throw it 4 rows into the stands. And that made it fun to watch. So if Josh Heupel can harness it, I mean, there's certainly reason to be optimistic about what Joe Milton can do. And obviously, Heupel saw something in him when he gave Joe Milton the starting job over Hendon Hooker, and then Hooker got the job when Joe Milton got hurt. So, defensive player of the year. We all joke that
everybody say it on 3.
I want to see what you guys if you guys what your argument is, because there's a couple of names in there that you could also potentially go to, but I know we're all high on one guy. Matt, I took yours, so you get to lead us off here with your pick for.
I mean, it's Harold Perkins. He's the best defensive player in football. He's the biggest disruptor. He gets to the quarterback better than anybody else. He's better off the line of scrimmage than anybody else. It's really short, sweet, and to the point. He is the best defensive player in college football. He has the highest ceiling. He is what we thought Will Anderson was going to be. Not that Will Anderson was bad by any means last year, still had a very good year, but it's almost like Will Anderson times 2 with the hype with this kid. Obviously he's still on the younger side, but he's the best, most talented player in college football. We saw him do the most last year. And despite how much extra attention he's going to get this year, I still think he'll find a way to be every bit as effective.
Phil?
Agree with that. So my again, keeping the Florida theme consistent here. I just more
Florida
just
Phil.
Yeah, just keeping, and again, it's absolutely Harold Perkins. But I think who could potentially compete just from a statistical standpoint is Jared Verse from Florida State. I love his story. An FCS guy myself, love guys coming over from the FCS as an offensive lineman as a freshman, and then they're like, wait, this guy's an absolute freak. Let's just flip him to the defensive side of the ball. Has a huge breakout season, gets moved over to Florida State. People are curious how we do with the increased competition. Puts up about 10 sacks and is a first-team All-American. So I think he'll have a chance, especially in the ACC. It's going to be a very heavy quarterback heavy, throwing heavy league this year, and so I think he'll have an opportunity to really put up a bunch of big numbers. But I don't think anyone's really coming close to Harold Perkins if he stays healthy.
I do, from the standpoint of potentially. I just think that teams are going to game plan to stop Harold Perkins, and like we saw with Will Anderson last year, like teams were actively doing everything they could to keep Will Anderson from impacting games last year all year. And that's why his statistical output was down. And I think you're going to see that with Harold Perkins, who is not, I mean, the physical talent is off the charts. I mean, just watch the Arkansas game. If you want to watch just something that is too good to be true, go look to see what Harold Perkins did against Arkansas. And just see a one-man wrecking ball in a game. I mean, one of the best performances that we've seen in a really long time. But now, how does he adjust when teams are game planning to stop him? It's going to be very interesting to see. A guy who I think could be the breakout defensive player of the year, and his team really kind of needs that, is JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. Because if you want to talk about the best performance by a defensive player last year, it was Harold Perkins against Arkansas, but Tuimoloau against Penn State was the second really best individual. Like he just, the consistency was not there with them. And if he can, and obviously what he did against Penn State, you're not going to do that very often in any game. But if he can be closer to that than kind of some of the inconsistencies he did last year, that's going to make an Ohio State team that is always just going to be frightening because they're Ohio State even better. So I separated MVP and Heisman. I want to go last on this one. So MVP. And I just think literally the guy you think is most valuable to their team, because I think you can make the argument that the best player, the Heisman Trophy winner, might not necessarily be the most valuable player to his own, might be not the most valuable player in the country, depending on who it is. So we're talking the literal most valuable player to their team in college football. Matt, start us off.
I don't think he's going to win the Heisman again, which is why I feel comfortable going with Caleb Williams as my MVP. Not just because he won the Heisman last year and was so good. Dan, you were talking about it. Receiving room's complete overhaul. Running back room is different. He is the driving force, the consistency coming back to that program that now, yes, last year they had high expectations, but there was also like if they're not that great, it's okay. It's year one of Williams and Lincoln Riley. Like, all right, now they have college football or playoff or bust expectations. Their defense, I know Alex Grinch's name is always up there as a really good defensive coordinator for some reason. Not really sure why. His defenses always kind of stink, and his teams can never tackle. We saw it when they played Utah last year a couple different times. Like, they've been soft. They've been not very physical. Caleb Williams is going to have to do it all for USC. He's going to have to put up a bunch of points every game, and he's going to have to do it with a completely new set of skill players, some change on the offensive line. I get it. He's really good, and it might sound as a cop-out to call last year's Heisman the MVP, but given what they have around him at Southern Cal, he's going to have to be every bit as good as he was last year, if not better, in order to get them to the now high expectations they have as the college football playoff.
Yeah.
Plus, he's got two quarterbacks in his conference too that they play Oregon this year, they play Washington this year. Like, he's going to have to go up with some big boys in games and come out and win those battles. Cam Rising in Utah. Actually, I don't know if they play Utah this year.
I think they do. I'm pretty sure they do.
I think they do. So I'm going a hometown route with Sam Hartman. Because again, I don't think he's winning the Heisman, but stay with me here, Dan. So listen to this. So without Sam Hartman, I think there's no chance that they win Clemson, Ohio State, or USC. So 3 biggest games I think are immediately chalked up as an L. They have a elite offensive line. They have elite running back skill, very solid defense, completely unproven receivers. And so I think with a redshirt freshman or a true freshman quarterback with zero actual real game experience, I think they're very flawed team without Sam Hartman. And so I think I looked at this as what's the ceiling floor if you lose a player. And it's just such a big drop off if Sam Hartman kind of falls off. And so for me, it's looking at the perspective of this is a guy who can, I don't think they're going to be a playoff team, but they can be a 10, 11 win team. And without him, they're a 7 or 8 win team at best, in my opinion. And so he also takes a group of unproven but very talented receivers and gives them a chance to elevate their game, to throw them open, to make up for some of their mistakes, in which case those mistakes do not get masked by quarterback. So I think the offense would turn into a very similar offense that we saw last year, which was we're going to load the box and let you run. Good luck if Drew Pine can throw it over 45 yards. To slot in someone who's one of the best statistical leaders in NCAA football.
I'm just surprised you didn't pick Hartman for your defensive player of the year too, Phil. That's basically.
I mean, he probably will have a tackle this year and force a fumble that he then will return himself for a touchdown while smiling beautifully at the camera.
Very handsomely.
Very handsomely. He's hot, Dan. Give me a break.
Oh, boy, I'm not denying it. As we talked about in our group chat, I went down a really embarrassing rabbit hole. We tried to refute the point of Sam Hartman being the hottest college football quarterback this year. And I mean, I couldn't come up with an immediate answer, but nevertheless,
Matt in my search history it gets a little weird.
Listen,
you got to go incognito. You got to go incognito mode when you're Google searching hottest college quarterback.
Hot Sam Hartman, shirtless, mustached. What?
For my MVP,
save us here, Dan.
For my MVP, I'm going to go to a guy who's often maligned by the two of you, but I will explain why I'm picking this guy. My MVP for college football in 2023 is the quarterback of the Oregon Ducks, Bo Nix. And
we don't malign him anymore. We like him now.
No, we like Bo Nix now.
Yeah, we flipped. Unlike Sean Clifford, never flipped.
So my reasoning is this: to me, Bo Nix is the most college football player in 2023. And you can say the most what? No. There is no what. He is the most college football player in 2023. There's been so much talk over the past week in particular about what makes college football. And yes, like the regionalism and all that stuff that we're losing because of realignment and all that really, really sucks that we're losing that. But there's another element about college football that makes it what we love. And it's the imperfect nature of college football. College football can be some of the best football you've ever seen. It can be some of the worst football you've ever seen. It can be absolutely hysterical. It can be absolutely dreadful. And it can be absolutely memorable in every single possible way. Bo Nix 2 years ago at Auburn was 86th in the country in passing efficiency. Last year, he was 7th in the country in passing efficiency. He can make plays with his arm. He can make plays with his legs. He can throw the ball to the other team. He can still do dumb things and make dumb mistakes. He's quarterbacked in the Iron Bowl. He's quarterbacked in what we used to call the Civil War. Like, this is a guy who's been around for a long, long time. He's the kind of guy who we have watched forever. We get to watch one more year, hopefully go out in a Pac-12 that is going to be a bloodbath and put up memorable performances in the last year of the Pac-12 as we know it. And then next year get drafted in like the 5th round. And then we'll all be cheering when he throws a touchdown in a 4th quarter of a preseason game and then is never heard from again. But I salute you, Bo Nix, a guy who has lived a very, very, very eventful college football life and will continue to thrive this year for the Oregon Ducks, who very well could win the Pac-12. I think you just have to spin a wheel and pick a team because it's going to be a bloodbath.
Yep.
Dan, I'm in full agreement with everything you just said.
Yeah.
So I love it. Like, he's just such a college football player, just like such that guy. So
I took a similar approach to the Heisman. So I'm glad that you.
So did I.
Like pure, just like college football, because it is something that makes it so unique that just a change of system, change of scenery, different uniform, granted a lot of different cool uniforms at Oregon, just makes a guy explode onto the scene.
So who's your pick?
So my pick is keeping the Florida theme very strong here with Jordan Travis. And so again, a guy who I don't.
Might have to buy you some Florida State gear or something.
Well, no. Okay. First off, the defensive pick, we all had Harold Perkins, and that was I was just explaining a guy who is similar to Disrupt.
You want a helmet for the bedroom? Hang on your mantle?
I mean, kind of now. I wouldn't hate it. But here's the reason, though. Here's the reason. They're going to be a high-profile team with some very high-profile games early in the season and late in the season. So he can come out against LSU week 1, get a lot of hype for putting up a lot of yards, has a medium-ish schedule throughout the meat of the year after week 4, after they take on Clemson. We can put on some big-time stats, and then going down the stretch has a couple big-time games whether it's going against Miami late just from an optic standpoint, going into an ACC title game, going into a potential playoff. I think the makings of the schedule is there when people care about those big games. He has those big game moments. Also, being a dual threat quarterback in a system like that, you can put up some really huge yards and do some Superman type stuff, in which case those are considered like highlight reel Heisman moments where it's not him just throwing guys wide open. It's him kind of doing some crazy things with his legs, getting a lot of extra yards and things like that, which again is very much a college football type player. On top of that, he has my favorite wide receiver in college football this year in 6'7" Johnny Wilson. Like watching that guy run.
It's just a great college football name too, Johnny Wilson.
He's 6'7" and he's been a bit streaky, but when he's on, he put up over 150 yards like 2 or 3 times last season. And so I think just from that standpoint, he has also Jordan Travis can have wildly inflated passing numbers by having 4 catches to Johnny Wilson for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so I think he has the makings of a schedule and the supporting pieces around him to make a run for it. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And I didn't mention Sam Hartman there, so I don't think he's going to win the Heisman, but he could.
I like it.
Matt, who you taking?
Didn't I take my MVP already?
This is Heisman.
No, we're on to Heisman.
Oh, we're on Heisman. Sorry, didn't realize we were on to Heisman. I'm
Thanks
sticking in the
show,
Pac-12. Honestly, I've been in between 2 Pac-12 quarterbacks, one of which was Bo Nix. I went the other way here though. I got my Washington shirt on. I'm going Michael Penix Jr. The schedule lines up pretty nicely for them this year. They get Oregon at home, they get Utah at home, and they have a high-profile game November 4th at USC, which is like, I think in Heisman races, it's important to have that big one towards the end of the year. Obviously, a Pac-12 championship bid would help as well. But I think he put up insane numbers last year. It was over 4,500 yards passing, 31 touchdowns. He's got his 2 tackles on the offensive line are coming back. A lot of weapons are coming back for them offensively. Kalen DeBoer just seemed to tap into something there that obviously stayed healthy, which helped too, but tapped into something there that just really clicked for that Washington team. I think he's going to have an outstanding year again this year. Like I said, schedule lines up for him. I think they'll be right there in what's going to be a bloodbath of Pac-12. I think they're going to be there at the end, and I think they're going to win this conference. I guess that's a spoiler for our Pac-12 preview show whenever we do it. I really like his chances this year. I think the numbers are going to be there. I think Caleb Williams is going to have a great year, but I also think the Heisman exhaustion, the hesitance to have a repeat winner is a real thing too. And I think voters look for somebody else. And I think if Michael Penix and Washington beat USC on November 4th, that's going to be all the reason they're going to need because the number is going to be there. So I really like Michael Penix coming out of Washington winning the Heisman this year.
So you touched on something. I came up with 3 options to give myself a lot of flexibility.
I also had a couple other options too.
You guys were going to go in the route that I was going to go. None of you went in the route that I did, so I can actually use all of mine. I did want to make a quick point because I'm not going to pick Caleb Williams. However, my whole argument is this: like, it is so exceptionally dumb that we have set such a high standard for returning Heisman Trophy winners that they just basically have no shot to win the Heisman Trophy. Like, if Caleb Williams is the best player in college football this year, he should win the Heisman Trophy. Like, I don't care. Bryce Young was the best player in college football last year. I don't care that Alabama lost 2 games. They technically only lost 1 with him on the field, and that was after his kicker missed a field goal and Tennessee drove down and kicked the field goal to win the game. Bryce Young was the best player in college football last year. I don't even think he finished in the top 5. So it's dumb. The second guy on my list, and this is going to be a point that I want to prove, is I'm going to start my overarching thesis is the best player in college football does not have to be a quarterback. It drives me crazy that this is only really ever a quarterback award.
I agree with you.
I'm just going to get to my guy I'm saying my Heisman pick. Is he going to win it? Absolutely fucking not. Should he? If he has any kind of good statistical season, he should. And that's Marvin Harrison Jr., who is the best player in college football. Like, Georgia and Ohio State, between the 2 of them, that game last year in the bowl game, how many guys from those teams are going to be in the NFL someday? Like,
and his injury is what changed the game. If he doesn't get hurt, I think 40, Ohio State wins that game.
Exactly. He was like the 2 best players on the field in that game were Marvin Harrison Jr. and CJ Stroud. And Marvin Harrison Jr. in a game full of 30, 40 guys who are going to like ultimately when all is said and done are going to play in the NFL, was the best player on the field that day. He is a complete monster of a wide receiver. We know the pedigree. We know his dad's a Hall of Famer. We know how good he is. I mean, this is a program with Garrett Wilson and Jackson
Chris
Smith and
Olave.
Jigba and Chris Olave. And this guy's the best of all of them. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is just my stump speech for giving the Heisman Trophy to the best player in the sport, whoever that may be.
Dan,
I agree with everything you said.
Hey, Matt, do you know who my number 2 was?
Marvin Harrison Jr.
No, Notre Dame offensive tackle Joe Alt, who I think is the best tackle in college football. How awesome would it be?
Just 1 year you give it to a
one
left
year,
tackle.
it just went to an offensive tackle who's just so dominant, and it should, right? And I think I too get very frustrated with that when you look at like a running back or wide receiver who just puts up just absolutely stupid, ridiculous video game numbers, and then it just goes to a quarterback.
Well, see, I agree with everything Dan said, except for one thing. I do think there is absolutely a path for him to win the Heisman this year. We saw Devontae Smith do it not that long ago. And if CJ Stroud was coming back to Ohio State with Marvin Harrison Jr. this year, no chance. Because if Marvin Harrison has a great year, that means CJ Stroud had one as well. This year, we have ourselves a new quarterback. And if Kyle McCord has a great year, that means Marvin Harrison Jr. probably has one too. But Marvin Harrison Jr. does have that reputation now of that elite wide receiver. Everybody knows he's that good. Everybody does have those high expectations for him. So if they have an awesome year and they're 11-1 or whatever, and they go beat Michigan and they are, Big Ten champions and all that, because Marvin Harrison Jr. was that guy, I do think he has a better chance than Kyle McCord or whoever ends up starting to win the Heisman Trophy, because it's not likely at this point, but the precedent has been set now with Devontae Smith where it's unlikely, but it can happen. And I do think that reputation of Marvin Harrison Jr. in the media with all the voters does give himself a chance. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he would not win it.
Yeah, I hope you're right. Like, obviously, I hope you're right. I just think that it's the exception that Devontae Smith winning, to me, was the exception, not the rule.
It was. A lot of things had to go right, but things can go right for him this year. And if Ohio State is undefeated in a national in the number 1 seed in the playoff, because Marvin Harrison Jr. was that dude, he's at least going to be in New York and in the top 2. Like, he'll get the vote. He'll get votes.
Yeah, my other guy who I considered, because I thought someone might say Marvin Harrison Jr. Although I don't think he should be eligible for the award because I'm not convinced he's human, and I'm assuming the Heisman Trophy has to go to someone who's human, is Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. We talk about guys who just overall best players in college football. Good Lord, Brock Bowers is inhuman. Don't know who's going to be throwing him the ball. Don't know if they're going to be any good. Don't know what the Georgia offense is going to look like with Bobo and at the helm calling plays again. But God, that guy.
They would give him like end arounds. I mean, it was just it was watching him play again is like not watching a human. So I actually had for some backup picks, I had for MVP. Just because, again, I don't think Heismans are given out to non-quarterbacks. For my MVPs as backups, I had Bowers and Marvin Harrison Jr. Because, again, watching both of them play, it's not like watching this is like just a great statistical quarterback. It's like watching someone who is playing a different sport. And so I'm excited, one, as a Notre Dame fan, not to have to hear the constant bitching about Michael Mayer versus Brock Bowers. Just enjoy 2 awesome college football players. Like, it's just annoying. And so also just seeing what Brock Bowers does with the new quarterback. And a reason that I think both him and Marvin Harrison fall more into the category of an MVP is they're not returning very strong, proven quarterbacks. So again, a lot of the burden's going to be put on their shoulders, which I think does give them an interesting angle where, again, people know Bowers, people know Harrison Jr., but if they're blowing up, it's not on their quarterbacks, it's them bringing their new quarterbacks along, because probably what you'll see more underthrown balls, more contested catches, less bang bang type plays, just because they don't have the timing, they don't have the experience, and so a lot of that gives them a little bit more potential highlight reel plays.
I think the flip side of that argument is if it doesn't matter how good those guys are, if their quarterbacks can't get them the ball.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of my argument about either those guys being an MVP, and really realistically them winning a Heisman Trophy is I don't doubt that Kyle McCord will be okay. We have enough track record with Ohio State.
He'll be fine.
I don't think suddenly, like, this isn't a Clemson situation where they had generational quarterbacks making offensive coordinators look good. Like, no, like Ohio State, they're good. Their staff is good. They know how to get quarterbacks ready to play. Maybe not as good as CJ Stroud out of the gate. I think he'll be pretty good. That said, maybe he's not. We don't know. You know, so yeah, man. Ooh, God, it's good to talk some ball.
Any honorable mentions in any of these that we missed? Anything we want to touch on?
I had for rookie of the year potentially just because Cormac McLean,
Cormani, right?
Cormani McLean.
Colorado, Colorado.
Colorado cornerback, just because I think Colorado, because of Deion's, going to get a lot of press and a lot of coverage. And being opposite of Travis Hunter, people probably won't target Travis Hunter right away. But he's a freak. And being there, being coached by Deion and his staff. I mean, I'm not high on Colorado this year, but I'm high on their cornerbacks, and Travis Hunter and McLean on the outsides. It's
really good.
It's really
good.
They have and he has like the freak cornerback length of just like ridiculous wingspan, and ridiculous like athletic top end speed, all that stuff. So I'm really curious to see kind of how he does. I'm excited to watch Colorado, not because I think they're going to be good, just because it's going to be a weird, funky experiment. And I think we can get into it later. It's both good and bad for college football, but doesn't make me any less excited just to watch whatever type of product they put on the field.
Yeah. I had Cade McNamara in my portal god. I think Iowa's – I'm not sure Brian Ferentz is a very good coach, and by I'm not sure, I'm fairly certain he's not a very good coach. But Iowa – like, he has that ultimatum now in his contract where they have to average 25 points a game, which is wild. But like, he gives Iowa a quarterback for the first time. And I mean, they had quarterbacks, like, going back a couple of years, whenever they have a decent one, that team usually wins 9 or 10 games, and they have a decent one. Cade McNamara is not going to win a Heisman, but we've seen what he can do on a team with a good running game and a good defense. And he's got a couple tight ends to throw to. Like, the Big Ten West is obviously a lighter schedule than the East. That schedule is not too bad for Iowa this year. Like, I think you could see Iowa win 10 games, and I don't think I'd be all that surprised, because I think they have a solid quarterback play. They're going to take care of the football, and that defense is still going to be – I know they lost pieces, but they still got a lot coming back. They're going to be really good again. So I think it's a just perfect Iowa quarterback fit. Nothing flashy, but he's going to do a lot of the right things. He's going to be great in the locker room. He can throw the football a little bit. And I cannot stress this enough. He's not Spencer Petras. Which is very important.
I'm not talking about Iowa football until
that's fair, and I respect that. That's a fine answer. I don't blame you for it, but I wanted to throw that one in there.
So one school that had a couple of guys that I considered was UCLA. I wanted to stay away from. I wanted to stay away from quarterback for the rookie of the year. So, but Dante Moore, if Dante Moore ends up getting the job at UCLA, he's a huge talent. If he gets that job, like, they're a team with enough pieces and whatnot that they can contend again in that conference. Like, they were right there last year, and Chip Kelly seems to kind of figured some things out there. And Dante Moore gives them a very high ceiling. And the other guy,
you might as well just start him, right?
They should.
Like, why not? It's a tough Pac-12 this year, anyways. Like, you're probably stretching to compete or finish in the top 4 or 5. Like, I think if they don't, whatever. He might transfer as well. Like, he's already not happy with his NIL there. I know Phil and I watched this. He was rumored to go to Notre Dame for a long time, and then it was Oregon, then it was Michigan State. Like, the NIL thing has been very real for him and the drama there. Like, just let him start. Throw him into the fire. He does have that really high ceiling. He's a ridiculously talented quarterback. And if you go 7-5 this year because he was talented but made some mistakes, but now you have a year under his belt going into next year, hopefully you keep him through next year and figure out the NIL stuff, I think you're better off for it. I'm always, in situations like that, I'm always pro just like, let's just get it. Let's throw him into the fire. Let's see what he's got. Let's get him that experience, because I think there's no substitution, no replacement for experience.
Then my other guy at UCLA was a portal god option, and that's Carson Steele, the running back.
What a name, too.
Transferred from Ball State, ran for 1,556 yards, and has a pet alligator named Crocky J. They never really explained why he named an alligator Crocky J, but nevertheless, he was a consideration for my MVP.
I thought it was ironic.
I don't. He does. I've listened to some interviews with him. I don't think he thinks that deeply. I don't think he's a deep thinker necessarily. he was my consideration for my MVP for the most college football player of 2023, except he needed to go somewhere like a Kansas State or an Oregon State, like a hipster choice. You go to UCLA, you go to Hollywood. I can't really get behind that, but he's a really good player, and they're gonna they brought in some guys in the portal in the Pac-12. I'm so sad that the Pac-12 is going away. But we're gonna have 1 year of a complete bloodbath with
Let's have some fun with it.
So it's gonna be a great conference, and it's gonna be a great year. And gosh, guys, we are what 2.5 weeks away?
19 days away from week 0.
From week 0.
Hell yeah! Is there anything we forgot? Anything else we want to address here?
Are we doing the full superlatives for FCS this week or next?
I'll leave that show to you guys.
Oh man, I'm completely blanking on the coach's name. My MVP and player of the year, Matt Sluka. Coach of the year is the guy from Holy Cross. His name I forgot.
Bob Chesney, baby.
Chesney, future UConn head coach. The guy UConn should have hired. Nevertheless,
well, Jim Moore Jr. is doing well.
He is. Jim Moore Jr. did a great job there. It's funny. I thought about buying tickets. They opened the season on a Thursday against NC State at home, UConn, the first week of the season. And I'm only like 15, 20 minutes away from where they play. They don't play in stores. They play in East Hartford. And it's like, man, I want to watch the Minnesota-Nebraska game and the Florida-Utah game. The Florida-Utah game being on a Thursday is so weird to me.
I kind of like it, though, because that one might be one I get lost in the shuffle. I like it.
Oh, yeah. So that'll be fun. So I thought about
games of the year that aren't involving our teams that we're looking forward to. Obviously,
I was going to say,
what you were going to say.
What, Boston College Holy Cross September 9th?
Yeah, exactly.
So you said games we're looking forward to that don't involve our teams?
Yeah, so no Texas for you, no Notre Dame for us.
I mean, LSU, Florida State. Yeah. I'm not officially claiming Florida State is my team. I just think that game has. I mean, last year it was just an awesome, fun game to start college football. And I'm going to say start college football week 1 because like week 0 is truly an appetizer this year.
I know what you mean.
And so I really think for me that's like the kickoff game that's just going to make me be like college football is here and is back, and I'm going to be my wife and family probably be talking to me, and it's just like not
I'm
registering
slightly. I wasn't listening.
I'm just like absolutely locked in.
I got a couple from the Big Ten. I'm really excited for Michigan Penn State because Michigan's schedule is light again this year. The non-conference is a joke, but they got to go to Penn State, and that's a team I think we're all a lot of people are pretty high on this year. I'm higher on them this year because of their quarterback situation, but they have a lot coming back. And then in that same conference, I think it's November 4th, Ohio State goes to Wisconsin. Looking at Wisconsin's schedule and like how high I am on Luke Fickell and Tanner Mordecai in that offense, like there's a very real chance we have 2 undefeated top 10 teams going at it in Madison that night. And that's an electric atmosphere. At the very least, I think there's a pretty good chance Wisconsin's only a 1-loss team. Schedule's not all that bad. Like I fully expect that to be like a massive, huge college game day showdown type game. I'm really excited for that one.
I'm just excited that there's not like a clear-cut dominant number 1 team coming into this year. I think even Georgia has questions. Exactly, where there are a lot of questions, and I'm kind of hoping for a year of chaos. It's just more fun when there's chaos, and I don't know. I just cannot wait for college football. Like the amount of times I feel like our group text has just been like football is like just like little nuggets of football throughout the past like however long it's been since football has been back or has been gone.
It's nice to have it back.
It's the best. That's it.
For me, the 2 games, I mean, you brought up Georgia not being dominant. Georgia, Tennessee, the only game on Georgia's schedule where they should be challenged, even though Georgia's got some questions. So Georgia was supposed to play Oklahoma this year. When Oklahoma got announced they're going to the SEC, they canceled the series with Georgia. So Georgia had to replace them with some random team. So basically, and Georgia can't play themselves, and they didn't draw LSU or Alabama. So their schedule's super easy, and Tennessee's the only team that could challenge them. So that one's interesting. And then me being the guy that I am, I'm gonna have to Google it while I'm telling you about the other one because I'm even having a pick that's even more me being me in a second. But the mild me being me, November 25th, Tulane against UTSA.
That'll be a fun one.
The Group of 5 game of the year.
Yeah.
With SMU getting to avoid both of those teams in the regular season, I think SMU's got a really good chance to make the AAC title game, which means the Tulane UTSA game might be a play-in game. or it could just be round one between these two teams. Frank Harris, Michael Pratt, two really good quarterbacks. So I'm really excited to watch that one. And I'm Googling a schedule real quick to make sure that I saw this correct. All right, September 9th, which is week 2. Fuck, it's at the same time as the Texas-Alabama game. God dang it. So I probably won't be super locked into it. However, our FCS banger of the year, not involving Holy Cross, number 3 Montana State on the road at number 1 South Dakota State. Defending champs, the Jacks, hosting the number 3 Bobcats.
Yeah.
Legitimately, if that game weren't at the same time as the Texas-Alabama game, might get big TV consideration.
I mean, the Jacks are just an unbelievably well-coached and talented team that is fun to watch. Also, great uniform team.
Mm-hmm. Both, like the blue and gold, although Stiglmeyer retires, so I think the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator took over there. Touchdown Tommy Malott is back at Montana. It's going to be a great game. My only complaint is I wish this was like in early December.
Yeah.
And it was snowing.
A little snow everywhere. We need that.
A little snow. I wish it were also in Montana in the snow, but nevertheless. And of course we end on talking South Dakota State, Montana State, because
that's what we do
on the Blogger Bowl. So I know Matt's got a tight out, so let's go ahead and wrap this bad boy up. We appreciate the handful of you that checked in. We will be back probably during week 0 to do conference previews. We'll do the Power 5 leagues. So we will talk about those teams then, and then regular season is going to start. We are going to launch into the Blogger Bowl for 2023. So we appreciate everyone for riding with us. For Florida Phil, for Matt, I'm Dan. We appreciate you guys watching, listening, whatever, and we will talk to you soon.